Hello from Tel Aviv and welcome to Young Progressive Voices from Israel. The format gives a platform to young representatives of the progressive camp in Israel in order to talk about their political activism, about their wishes, fears and hopes in very difficult times, and to share these thoughts with an international audience of progressive youth. My name is Ralf Melzer. I'm the head of the Israel office of Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. And the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung is the producer of this podcast series in cooperation with the youth movement He Chalutz. And each of our episodes are jointly co-hosted and distributed by an international social democratic youth organization. And today our partners are the Falken, the socialist movement, the Falken from Germany, the Falkens, and I'm very happy that Karl Müller-Bahlke, the chairman of the Falken, is with us via Zoom today from Berlin. Hi, Karl.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Karl and I will be jointly moderating this episode today, and here in the studio in Tel Aviv are Adi Asaf and Eliran Bykhovsky. Welcome.
Hi.
Great to be here.
Adi is a social and climate activist working with the deputy mayor of Tel Aviv and currently mainly engaged in the Hostages and Missing Family Forum. And Eliran is the vice president of UCI, the International Union of Socialist Youth, representing the Young Democrats, and formerly in the same position for Young Meretz, which became in the meantime part of the Democrats. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adi, let me start with you. As I said, actually your field of expertise is climate and environment, but do you currently actually have the space to work on these topics, or is everything absorbed by the crisis, the war, the hostages? What's your situation?
So first of all, I'll say that I'm no longer in the Family Forum. I was volunteering in the Families Forum for 4 months, and in the past year, I've been part of the social movement that is women protests for the return of the hostages. And as a climate activist, it's been very difficult to be advocating for topics like climate in Israel these days. The war is a big part of our lives, and it's been everything we've been doing for the past year. I don't think I can even start thinking about the meanings of this war for the climate afterwards in Israel, for our ability to manage to work ahead of it and to take care of the communities that needs it. As a young woman, I can't even start thinking about what it means to be in a country that people can be kidnapped from their houses and their everyday lives, and for the government to not return them. And when a basic thing like that happens, and I don't even have a family that is in Gaza now or was part of the 7th of October, but I can't even think about anything else that is not this topic, because when this basic thing happens, it means that the government can take care of us, and it means that the government can do whatever it takes for us to live here peacefully and for us to have an everyday lives that we deserve. And this is like the first layer of everything. And only when it happens, only when they come back, we can start thinking about other things that are obviously related. When the government is funding war, and when the government is occupied on this topic, it can't do anything that even start preparing us for the devastating climate things that are about to come.
Eliran, as Adi just said, the focus is very much on the internal situation, but huge part of your work is dedicated to these international, to the international level. And how do you cope with it? With that being at the same time a representative of the progressive camp from Israel internationally, at the same time, of course, also involved in the situation here. So, what does this mean for your personal life and for your life as a political activist?
Well, first of all, I want to very much connect to what Adi said in the way that I feel personally, and I think is a feeling that all Israelis share at some point, that until the war started, until the 7th of October, some of us trusted the government more, some of us less, but in the essence, we all had this basic feeling that if we, at least to some extent, are involved citizens, we were protesting, we're fighting for our country, and it could be the judicial protest, it could be the climate change and whatever. We had the feeling that first of all, we can facilitate change, and second of all, that at the end there are enough people up there that care or have any sense of responsibility. And I think in a lot of ways, in too many ways, that feeling was completely crushed on 7th of October. And unfortunately, it wasn't rebuilt, and even, I can say even worse, since then. I can say about the international, so to speak, the international part of my political activism. I can tell you about a lot of great experiences about people from all over the world. I was on the 7th of October at 11 o'clock a.m. in the morning. I was already there. Okay, where they called me at about 9, told me come. We don't know what's going on, but we all should go. And around 7, 8 in the evening, when I had the moment to open my phone, look what's going on, I opened the UC Presidium group, okay? And even it's 7, 8 p.m. on the 7th of October, there was a message from one of the members of the Presidium saying, more or less in these words, I don't have the exact quote, I don't remember it, but more or less, there is going to be a war in Gaza, we should condemn the war now, the Israeli aggression, and so on and so forth. And even though personally I have no problem speaking my mind, but I don't like to argue, especially in WhatsApp groups, but I remember this was the first time in my life. I've been active in UC for 14 years, more or less, as a representative of Young Meretz. It was the first time that I felt, wow, something's really off in how people perceive all that is going on. And little did I know, because after the more it escalated during the next months, this discourse became even worse. And on the other hand, the way when I tell an average Israeli, yes, I'm vice president of an international organization of leftist young people and so on, the first question is, wow, how do you deal with all their prejudice and so on and so forth? And even then, the answer is usually, I feel it only like when either there's a specific some kind of event like the killing of the International Kitchen activists and so on, but this is a really dual situation between a lot of solidarity and support from a lot of international friends in Germany, in the UK, in Scandinavian countries, in France and so on, and on the other hand a lot of hostility that sometimes I feel that is targeted towards the Israeli government, which I'm very much not part of, and they know that. but they see me as, unfairly so, I think, a representative of some bigger narrative that is orchestrated by someone else. And the same here. I get from my friends, they ask me, why do people in Amsterdam campus, for example, do these protests and so on? I said, first of all, I don't know them. And second of all, most of the people I know in a lot of these places in the social democratic parties are at least much more careful, a lot of them, and a lot of them are very supportive also. So I have always to mediate between these two different narratives.
Yeah, thank you. Karl, the Falcon are also part of UC, and you in your capacity as the head of the Falcon are also board member of the Willy Brandt Center in Jerusalem, so you are very much also involved in all these debates we already now touched in the first part of our session. But what I wanted to ask you is, you said change is possible, and there is a huge spectrum of topics, from climate change to democratic values to social justice. If you look on the current situation from the perspective of your organization, is there actually still the possibility to work with partners in Israel on these topics? Or is it everything completely overshadowed by crisis, war, and the situation we are confronted with right now?
Yeah, I think it would be it would not be honest to say that everything is just working perfectly and that we can just continue. I think the reality is that it is very difficult, and that the situation that we are in since the 7th of October is overshadowing every other work that we do. On the other hand, the situation that we are in is also connected to the work that we've been doing for a long time. I think with our partners in the region, we always emphasized that we need long-term peaceful solutions, and we were always trying to work for that. So in a sense, it has become much more difficult to do our work, but in a sense also the importance of our work has become much more obvious, which is at least a small positive sign, I think, or something that we can take with us to say, okay, the work that we are trying to do, its importance grows at the same time as its difficulty, and these two things are connected. At the same time, I wonder, because I can connect to what the two of you said. I wonder, as someone who's living in Germany, but who has a lot of friends in Israel and in the whole region, and we are closely working together with them. I wonder oftentimes what we can actually do from our part in Germany also to support you, because Germany is a very strong ally of Israel, but in a lot of times this only means support for the Israeli government, and in this case for the Netanyahu government. And I wonder what we can actually do to help progressives or leftists like you in Israel to lobby for what you're trying to do.
If I can divide the work of the international left on not only Israeli issues, I see it now in Ukraine, but I can see it in different conflicts that I got the chance to be informed about. It usually divides into two different categories that are separated completely. One is coming to help with individual, more humanitarian or personal individual empowerment of people on the ground, which is amazing, great. Or on the other hand, having high-level discussions amongst mostly international or Western activists about the situation in said country, usually without most of these people present, or like with one or two speakers. And in the middle, where the connection between the international community and what's happening in the country on the ground, it's very little. On the other hand, in the right, and maybe this is maybe the answer how I would like to see more and more of the international support from our partners and people who want to help, is trying to empower the narrative of the, so to speak, progressive, patriotic Israeli camp. Meaning, I am an Israeli that went to defend my country on the 7th of October, and I think what is done in Gaza for months is a catastrophe that is a shame for me. I'm not saying done in my name. It is done by us, okay? And our responsibility is to acknowledge that and understand will need to solve it. And if I would like something, the Falcon are great. It's not for you. You're amazing. Just continue. But in terms of UC, in terms of other international partners, is trying to not so much discussions abroad or helping Palestinians with their olive harvest, but more to, for example, make sure that there is no situation where the progressive sides in Israel and Palestine are in almost complete, they are completely not in conversation for almost a year, okay? This is a problem, and it's not a secret, okay? But the fact that is nothing being done about it shows how little is the understanding about the day-to-day life that needs to be changed by this pressure or by this support from our partners. I think this is the thing. Sorry, I took
No.
Oh, it's amazing.
I mean, Karl actually touched this topic of the special relations between Germany and Israel and the solidarity that has been expressed by Germany, and at the same time, this ambivalence between actually to whom the support is dedicated, and I know that the protest movement before October 7th already would have wished to have more support from abroad, and the question Karl raised is precisely that. And now the question goes to you from the Israeli perspective. How would you say can this solidarity addressed and implemented in a way that is understood it is not being a support of a specific government, but of the Israeli people, of the society based on common values? How this can be done?
So I think I have two answers. The first one is the first perspective is not even related to Israel. I feel like part of the feeling that we have that is non-hopeful and very desperate is that it's part of a very large movement around the world for non-democratic, non-liberal, fascist movement that in Israel we feel like we have there's no lighthouse everywhere. There's nowhere we can look up to and say, okay, this is they can save us. Like, no one can save us. We are alone because all of democratic and social and liberal movements right now in the world are alone and they feel alone. So I feel like, first of all, advocating for those values in your country and shifting movements to be the democratic social movements that we need here in Israel and all around the world will help us see that it is possible and we can do it, and we have partners everywhere and we're not alone. So this is the first perspective. And the second perspective is it's really, really hard to say because we really do feel kind of alone here in the protest. Like, the first few months of the war were amazing, as I can recall. They were quite amazing because my perspectives from the family forum, we were everywhere. We had delegations with families going everywhere around the world, advocating. Everyone said that they are supportive. We had meetings with the president in Brazil, and we have meetings with the US, and everyone were really focusing on that and saying that that will help. And somewhere along the way, the tolerance stopped. Like, there were no more patience for that, and everyone started focusing on the government actions, and rightfully, they are terrible. I agree with everyone that Eliran said before. So I feel like something that the people themselves can do and not the government is be supportive in the streets for us, as well as we are supportive in the streets for the same values that we believe in, and act. The things that we do, the things that we see in the media in Israel are basically against everything we believe in. And the more we will see people in the streets, the more we will see support, the more, and it doesn't have to be support for Israel. It needs to be support for the same values that we support them. It needs to be supportive for the return of everyone to their places and for the end of the war, and the same things that we support them. The moment that we will see the movements around the world do that, we will feel that we can continue protesting, and we will have their back to keep on doing that.
If you think about your country in 10 years, what would you wish how Israel should look like in 10 years from now?
It brings us back to the other question, and I want to add on that, because I am very pessimistic at the moment, the same way as Eliran said it. We are shifting. I am quite pessimistic, but there are seeds of hope, and I feel like when I try to focus on those seeds of hope, I can start imagine something different here. It's very hard to separate between the things that I imagined and the things that I believe that will happen in 10 years. I don't know if I can now connect to that in a deeper level, but I feel like something will happen that is in a good way. I do feel like, wow, it's very, very hard. It's no, it's hard because it's we live it. Like, it's hard because it's very hard to see beyond the everyday lives that we live now. The meaning of being in a war and in a state of war for over a year, and having hostages still in Gaza, and knowing the things that we do in Gaza. And my family is living up north, and from Lebanon, they are now, it stopped, but they were having rockets daily. My parents stayed in their kitchen every night because they didn't have a shelter. So it's very hard now to look 10 years from now and say, okay, things will be okay. I'm not sure we can do that. That's why part of the issue is that we have to end the war. We have to stop it so we can start imagine different lives here in Israel for everyone, and in the Middle East for everyone. And it's very hard to be hopeful. There are seeds of hope. They exist. I can relate to that. Everyday people, but it's very hard to look right now into the future and say, okay, there will be peace, and we will be back to advocate for climate and for housing and for welfare and for everything that is the daily lives. But it's very hard to see it that way now because it's so bad. Like, there is no way. It's so bad. It's so difficult to say that things will change in the past month or in the past week or in the past days. So we are still very into that. It's not very optimistic.
I think it's very hard to answer this question because usually my very not It's not a tagline answer, because the real answer is it depends what people will do with their next 10 years. I think that's what makes me in a way optimistic, because I really believe that nothing is done for. I think one of the problems, I said some self-criticism about my generation, we think we're that special. And we think we live in some special times, okay? And it's not only in Israel. Everybody I go around feels like their current crisis is something that never happened, was never invented, and was never dealt with. That's just not true, okay? People and nations and regions recovered from much, much worse, okay? And a lot of the international trends we're having now, humanity in some ways recovered from them in the past, but it didn't happen because of a deterministic course of events. It happened because at critical points, good responsible people and good responsible leaders made the right decisions and pushed in the right directions in order to make this change happen. That's like a short answer, but I want to connect it a little bit to the previous question, because I think it has very much to do with it. It's a big topic, so I won't go into in depth, but I think one of the worst differences between the liberal, social democratic, left-wing camp all over the world and our opponents in the fundamentalist, fascist, extremist right that is now rising, is that when we get to ask the question, what will be in 10 years, we think of a responsible answer. We say, maybe it will be better if, and so on. And on the other side, they say, if you believe in something, if you do this simple thing, you will be great. How? Just because, okay? And even though I don't advocate for populism, I think we don't need to give people lies or tagline answers instead of the truth and facts and policy and so on. But I really think, and maybe it's also connected to the support, and this is where I finish. When Netanyahu meets with, and that's not a secret, Nazi parties in Europe, okay, the descendants of the worst in the political movements of the last century, for years, calls him his partners, uses them to wash his unpopularity abroad, and they use him to wash out their anti-Semitic backgrounds, okay? They are doing, in a way, what I think the left should do with the left wing in Israel and Palestine, but in a good way. Which, if you, and I say it a lot in UC, you don't want to support the Israeli government, fine, I don't either. But if you can differentiate between suffering people, for example, in Israel that are misplaced, or people that were murdered on 7th of October, or even people that, like me, had to go and fight, like after I was in reserve service. I wasn't obliged to come, at least in the first day. The fact that people cannot relate to these basic sentiments, a lot of them, is the problem we should deal with externally. And internally, we need, like, if for example, Olaf Scholz comes to Israel, he can meet with Netanyahu, it's formalities, okay? But I would expect, for example, for left-wing leaders wanting to support Israel, to elevate the power, at least the presence of the progressive narrative. Because otherwise, we see, like Adi said, the anti-Israeli protests that call for intifada in Amsterdam, or the extreme right that supports Israel supporting Netanyahu.
Yeah, and this leads me to my final question to you, Karl, because as you said, Eliran, governments have to deal with governments, right? But youth organizations like the Falcon can much more focus on common values, on common challenges we are confronted with, both in Europe and here in the region. So, I mean, is it naive, or do you see the possibility from the Falcons' perspective that exactly this could be an answer to this dilemma, how to express and how to implement this solidarity coming from Germany, simply focusing on common values and common challenges?
I think it's a good question if it's naive. I would actually say my experience, especially in the last years, is that common values and grassroots level connections are often more underestimated than overestimated in their political power. So I think it's very much a possibility, actually, and I think it's something that we should focus on, and that actually, sadly, the right does also focus on. I mean, they are also trying to do these things, but I think on these levels, on grassroots connections, on the level of youth exchanges, they are, in a sense, fighting in our territory. Like, we are better than them in this, and this is some strength that we have, these connections. The international right, of course, and as Eliran pointed out, they are very well connected. Like, Netanyahu and the Israeli right plays also a big role in the European right, of course, and in Germany as well. This is only one reason why we need also to work together, and why we need these connections, because they are doing as well. And of course, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, but I think on the grassroots level, on our connections, we are better than them. This is a strength that we have, and we should play to our strengths in that sense. And I think to bring it or to make a specific point, it's always a bit a cliche maybe that the leftists always say we have to connect our struggles, we have to connect these things. But I think in this sense, and in the topics that we talked about today, it's this connecting idea is really important, and is really a strength that we have. Like, we pointed out the question for climate change. Adi pointed this out, and I think it very naturally connects to the other political questions that we have, and to the political dilemmas that we have in the left internationally. The question of democracy and the judiciary reform very naturally connects to the issues of war and peace in this time. So I think we have to not only strengthen the connections between us and between the progressive actors in the whole region and internationally in general, but also use these connections and the connections between the different struggles that we have, actually, to enhance each struggle that we are in. And I think, this is a real possibility and the strength that we have. So at least in that sense, I can fulfill my socialist duty to be optimistic.
Thank you very much also for this encouraging and optimistic spin in the end. Thank you very much, Karl. And of course, thanks a lot to Adi and Eliran here in Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
And to all of you. This has been the 4th episode of Progressive Voices from Israel. Thanks for watching us, and we hope to be back soon. Thank you and bye-bye.